Welcome, fellow travelers along the highway of life.
I'm your host, Big T.
And I'm Blue Knight, and you've made it to the Midnight Truck Stop. This is where you'll hear stories from the highway told by people who've experienced them firsthand. Everyone's welcome, so pull up your chair, gather around the campfire, and join us as we delve into those strange, funny, and sometimes frightening experiences that so many of us have had while traveling the highways. Hey, Big T, what's up?
How's it going, man?
It's going. Are you excited to be here at the very first episode of the Midnight Truck Stop?
I am. We have a lot of good things in store tonight.
We sure do.
Well, let's get started. What do we got?
Well, I've been thinking about this, and this podcast is all about truckers and people on road trips that have had strange and sometimes funny, sometimes frightening experiences. And so I'd like to start off with a story that I think puts that all together. And then later in the show, we have a very special guest.
That's right. We have Mr. Craig.
That's right.
Craig's gonna come and tell us a crazy story, I should say.
Yeah, no, I've known Craig for probably 20 years now, and this is a very, very solid individual, very smart gentleman. He's funny, he's quirky, and I think that everyone's going to appreciate his story.
Absolutely, I can't wait to hear it. It's gonna be it's a good one, folks. It's a good one.
But let me start off by asking you, Big T, you have any highway stories?
You know what? I have a couple. That I'm going to share over the course of, our next couple podcasts.
Okay.
I got to kind of jot them down and recall them all.
You want to tease us a little bit?
Yeah, you know what? One of my stories takes place in Nevada, and I'm just going to say this. It happened in Pahrump. It was in Pahrump, and it has to do with some government vehicles and some green lights. So,
wow, I'll be able to government vehicles and green lights.
Government vehicles and green lights.
I've
Absolutely.
heard quite many of those stories throughout my life, as I'm sure many of our listeners have. But I can't wait.
Yeah, either can I. I can't wait to tell it. I want the audience to love it.
I bet.
Let's get started. You have a story, right?
I do. Now, this story, man, I've been holding on this story for 20 years. Of course, I've told my close friends and family members, but about 20 years ago, I was working in a little small suburb of Los Angeles, and I ended up meeting a guy who was a retired Department of Public Safety trooper out of Arizona. And we got to talking, and he told me quite a cool little story. Nothing supernatural. I guess it could be interpreted as supernatural, but let me get started, and you guys can judge for yourself. Okay, so the story goes like this. This gentleman tells me that when he was a young trooper, he was working along the highways there in Arizona, the highways either near or coming from and to the Mexican border. And state troopers, they're spread out all throughout the state. So he says he gets some information from one of his superiors that there's a big uptick in drugs being smuggled into the United States from Mexico. And that the drug cartels have their hand in this. So they tell all these troopers, hey, be on the lookout for these cars, and they give different descriptions. And this trooper decides, hey, in the middle of the night, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go on a drug interdiction mission. So he travels down this long stretch of lonely highway, and he ends up, parking along the side in the brush, turns off all of his light, and he says, it's pretty desolate out there. So this trooper, he drives out into the highway, and he says he's in a really desolate area. There's not a car in sight. He decides he's going to back up into the brush off the side of the road, turn off his lights, and just kind of see what happens over the course of the next hour or so. And he does that. He says he's just kind of taking it all in, getting sleepy, as anybody who's worked graveyard can imagine. Windows are down. It's a hot summer night. Not a car in sight. And then off in the distance, he sees this little flicker of a light. He says it's like a candle way, way, way out in the distance. And he knows it's the headlight of some car that's traveling down the highway. So he kind of sits up and readies himself. And as this car gets closer and closer, he's thinking, okay, I'm gonna check this car out. I'm gonna see what it looks like and see if it's one of these vehicles that match the description of what his superiors told him. So as the car approaches, he notices, number one, it doesn't have any plates on it. And there's two guys that are sitting in the cab of this pickup. Well, the trooper, he pulls out onto the highway, turns on his lights. Not his emergency lights, just his regular lights. And he says the car's going well past the speed limit, but it starts to slow down. It's probably made him as a trooper or figured that, somebody from the middle of nowhere had just pulled onto the highway, and that was kind of strange.
It's kind of eerie.
It is. And he says he's kind of monitoring these two in the cab, and not much is going on. He notices there's some cargo in the back bed of the pickup truck. He doesn't really know what it was or what it is. And then at one point, he says the passenger just turns all the way around in his seat and is kind of eyeing the trooper. So this makes the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He figures, what's going on here? Do they make me for a cop? At any rate, he decides to pull these guys over. So he turns on his emergency lights, but the car doesn't pull over right away. So now these thoughts are racing through his mind. He figures the next town is probably 10, 15 miles away. The nearest trooper is probably 10 minutes away if they're rolling as fast as they could to help him if he does need help. And he's wondering if these guys are going to lead him onto a pursuit. So as all these things are going through his mind, the car ends up pulling to the side of the road. He sees the turn signal come on. They pull to the side of the road, and the trooper thinks, okay, they're pulling over. Let me see what this car is all about. So he gets out of his car. He's just kind of monitoring the two men inside, and he says it's eerie because they're like statues. There's no talking between them. They're just stiff as a board.
It's pitch black dark out there, right?
It is dark, man. This is the middle of the night on the Arizona highway, and this trooper just has this uneasy feeling about the whole situation. So he decides, which I think is pretty smart, he decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to walk back behind my car, and I'm going to approach this car on the passenger side. And the hope is that if these two guys are inclined to do something, they may think that I have a partner because I've come up on the passenger side of their car, and that my partner is back behind me somewhere, maybe at the patrol car. So that's just what he does. He walks up the side of the passenger car, and he kind of illuminates the inside of the cab there. He sees nothing really out of the ordinary, and these two men just sitting there. The passenger rolls down his window, and he starts to speak with them. Well, they're both male Hispanics, and neither of them speak English. The trooper himself, he's Hispanic. Spanish was his first language, so he starts to converse with them. And he says it's the normal banter that goes back and forth between a cop and the people that they pull over, but something just wasn't right. These two guys were very, very nervous, and you can just tell they were fidgety. And the trooper decides that he's going to ask the driver to step out and to meet him on the shoulder so that he can check his license and registration from the shoulder. So the driver complies. He gets out of the car. He starts walking around the front of his pickup truck to the shoulder where the trooper's waiting for him. And the trooper says to me that as soon as this guy's feet hit the gravel, from the highway to the gravel, he hears the click of the passenger door. And at the same time, the driver who's walking towards him just lunges at him.
Oh, now the fight's on.
Now the fight is on. And this trooper is fighting for his life. He's fighting for his life not just against one man, but against two men who most likely have drugs that they're smuggling into the United States. And so here he is in the fight of his life. He can't get to his radio. He can't get to his gun. He is punching and just trying to protect himself as best as he can. And then out of the middle of nowhere, he hears this faint sound of electricity. And as I'm hearing the story, I'm thinking, this is strange, right? He says he hears this faint sound of electricity, and one of the attackers jumps off of him. So now he's left to fight the lone attacker, the driver. And he starts punching as wildly as he can. I mean, he's out of breath, he's tired, but he manages to turn the tables. So a few moments later, he finds himself mounted on top of this guy, and he's just throwing down blows. So much so that the guy is begging him to stop. He's kind of cowering. Wow. And the trooper manages to kind of catch his breath and put handcuffs on this guy, and he looks over, and the second guy that was on top of him, well, he's now sitting on his butt, and he's got his hands raised way up over his head. But there's a third man there. It just so happens that some truck driver who's coming down the Arizona highway sees this trooper, sees that he needs help, and he pulls over. So the way the trooper describes it, he says, here's this cowboy. He's wearing a cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and in his hand he's holding a cattle prod.
Oh, man.
A cattle
Wow.
prod that just moments before he used to basically stun this guy off of the trooper and give the trooper a fighting chance with the other guy. Well, the trooper, gets up and his uniform's dirty and it's torn, and he walks over to the other guy on the gravel there. He handcuffs him. He searches these two guys. Meanwhile, he's called dispatch and let him know what's happened. And off in the distance, he can hear the faint sound of these sirens. He knows help is coming. He puts these two in the back of his police car. He seals these prisoners inside, and he says just as he closes the door, he looks up, and this truck driver is just very nonchalantly, casually walking back to his cab. So he yells out to him. He says, "Sir, sir." And he says, this cowboy turns around, looks over his shoulder, and just stops. And he says, "All I could say was thank you. Thank you, sir." And man, like a scene out of a movie, this cowboy just tips his hat and then keeps walking towards the cab, hops on in, and he's off and gone in the middle of the night.
Wow.
So obviously they find drugs in the car. The two suspects are arrested. The trooper's okay. But he calls that man his guardian angel, and I would have to agree with him, wouldn't you?
I agree 100%.
I mean, that's a crazy story.
Truck driver comes out of nowhere, saves this guy's life. Think about it.
But check it out, Big T. I think that there are a lot of stories like that from the highway. And if I was a betting man, I would say that the majority of the calls and the majority of people that we get on this program are going to be truck drivers or troopers, police officers, sheriff's deputies, folks that are out there in the middle of the night traversing these highways, because there's a lot of crazy things that happen that no one really knows about. And this is the platform for people to tell us about it, right?
That's right. We want to hear it. We want to hear your stories. Call us in. We have a direct line. You give us a call at 909-993-3633, or you can email us at info at themidnighttruckstop.com. That's all one word, themidnighttruckstop.com. Send us your story. If you don't want to be on the air, you could always email us and we'll read it for you. If you want to be left anonymous, that's fine. We could do so. But yeah, we want to hear all your stories out there. So that brings us up to our next one, BK. We have a special guest that wants to share a story with you guys.
Yes, we do.
So let's go ahead and get him on the phone and let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, now let me kind of preface this by saying that this person I've known for the last 20 years. And to say that he wants to share this story is not quite factual. I had to coax him out of it a little bit, or coax it out of him. He had a strange experience along the 395 there out in Independence, California. And this was years before I knew him. And without further ado, let's get him on the phone. Let's have him start talking about it himself, because I think it's quite a story, and it's even more impactful when it's told by him.
Sounds like a plan. We'll get.
Hello.
Hello, Craig. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. How you guys doing?
We're doing well.
How are you?
Awesome. Yeah, hanging in there another day in paradise.
I hear that. Hey, so truth be told, for all of our listeners out there, I've known you for probably 20 years now, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna admit to at least 20, maybe a year or two more. But yeah, we've known each other quite a while on a lot of different levels and work and fun and families and stuff. So yeah,
that's right.
Got a lot of memories. Yeah.
And we've done some camping together.
More than our share. That's
more than our fair share. So for the audience members that are going to listen to this podcast, I've known Craig, like we said, probably about 2 decades. And, a lot of times when you hear stories like the one you're going to hear, people have a tendency to either ridicule or write somebody off as crazy. But given my close relationship with you and knowing who you are and what you're all about, I know the audience members don't know who I am, but I can attest to the fact that you are you're a regular guy. You're a sane person. You're quirky. You're funny. You're a businessman. You're a family man. You're a good man. And the experience that we're going to talk about, if I'm not mistaken, we had probably been on a few camping trips before you even shared it with us. And when I say us, there's a group of us who there's four of us that are pretty close and have gone on several camping trips. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we've the camping trips are the things we've always done together as kind of our guys' trip. But our families are intermingled. Our kids know one another.
Right.
We've all spent a lot of time. And yeah, I think I'm a pretty average average guy. I mean, but didn't talk about it with you guys for a lot of years because it's just I type of story that you hear from other people, and I know what I think when I hear it, and I think they're either off the rocker or they're embellishing a bit, or they're trying to I don't know, just it's not the type of thing that you buy into.
Right.
So and gotta be saying that's probably why it's got to be the right set of people in the right time. And for a long time, I didn't think there was.
So let's set it up.
To talk about.
Yeah, let's set it up. You make quite a few trips a year up the 395 towards places like Independence, California, up near Bishop. That's where we've done a lot of our camping, and I know that you've been doing that for years and years and years, whether it be for work or for pleasure. But on this particular trip, why don't you tell us about when it happened? I'm guessing it's about 25 years ago, since I've known you for 2 decades. Is that right?
Yeah. That's pretty close. I was trying to think about the exact timeline. I'm guessing I was about 28 at the time. My wife is 24. My wife now, but at the time we'd been dating since 18 and 22, and never a day apart hardly for a lot of years. Just pretty much a normal best friends, a little sister, and we just pretty normal life up to that point. But on occasion we'd camp and whatnot, anywhere from the Eastern Sierra range from 395 just past Ridgecrest, that they kind of start, and they go all the way obviously up north.
Yeah, I know you like that area a lot.
Yeah, it's there's some solitude to it. There's not a lot of people. If you want to hike up, spend a few hours going up into the high areas, you can get away from everybody, just kind of unwind, and cell phones don't work and things like that. So it's kind of a nice break, and you get a little recharge. Switch kind of gets thrown, and then you come back to the grind and down the city where we make our lives.
And you do it all over again, right?
Yeah. And so a little background on me is like Damon said, I'm probably just pretty average guy. Grew up in Southern California all my life, and have a kind of a technical professional career that is a form of contracting. I deal with a lot of logical stuff, technology, and things like that. I come from a family of literally rocket fuel scientists and bikers. Pretty much mechanics. So both sides.
That's quite a mix.
That's quite a mix.
Yeah. So I can pretty much relate to anybody I need to deal with, and I deal with people that are CEOs of large multinational corporations, and the guy that I'm getting equipment from at a parts counter and anywhere in between. So
why don't you take us back to that particular trip, because I understand that you and your then girlfriend, but now wife, had gone up there for a little camping getaway.
Yeah. Quick story before leaving. We just we've been together for quite a few years, about 10 years, and got kind of into our first little major tip where we're going to go our own ways. She made it about half a block down, turned around, came back, and we talked about things, and it led to us getting married a couple of years later. But after we kind of made up, we decided, I thought, well, gee, what a great way to get her to go camping. Typical guy, but I'm thinking, get out of town and let's just get away from all the pressures of everything. And
you're such a romantic.
Anything I can parlay. And she's a good sport. She likes it. At that time, not a problem with the tent, not a problem being out there, a little scared, of critters and things like most women, I think, in her from the city. But we have a good time. So we kind of threw stuff in the truck, and we literally left that night after a couple hours. So I figured strike the.
Now you're coming from Southern California, so that's It's about a 4.5 hour drive up from where we are
Yeah.
to that particular area.
Yeah, it's a good, it's close to, depending on which area you stop in, it's anywhere from 220 to 300 miles. But yeah, so it was a good little jaunt. And it was, I was on a weekend. I think we were going up there on a Friday. So typically, it was summertime. You know, you're going to have a hard time getting a spot. We just went in the back of the truck with the tent.
Yeah.
And we're going to get whatever we can get. So we get into a campground that's kind of low. And, you know, one of those ones that has the bathrooms that you can walk to. And, you know, it's not too bad, but a lot of, you know, family, kids.
Do you want to name the campground, or do you want it to remain anonymous?
I don't really have a problem with it. It's out of Independence, California, and it's called Grays Meadows. There's an upper and low Grays Meadows, and so it's a few minutes from town, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes down. And from up there, you can access some high country hiking and stuff. We've actually done that.
Yep.
In subsequent years. That's kind of where the story, I think when I shared it with you guys prior to that, it kind of made us want to go up and check out some of that area. But yeah, anyway, long story, trying to keep it short. We shot up to this campground. We knew it was going to be busy, so we figured we'll be out in the sticks.
Right.
And we're driving through it. Everybody does, trying to cherry pick a spot. And, you know, there's this awesome spot right down by the water. You know, literally a stream running a matter of feet away from the picnic table, and it kind of set down off the road into a little kind of pit and a lot of bushes and things. It was just perfect. You know, we're figuring, gosh, somebody must have just left this thing. There's no reason that, you know, this is going to be available. So we snatched it up and set our camp up and just was loving it. And then just figured, hey, that's fate. Things are working cool. But so we kind of hung out, pitched our tent, set up our camp, had a good little dinner, and, you know, everything was kind of smoothing over with her and I. Had a really nice night. Nothing crazy. We probably had a steak and a couple of beers at the most, and went back into the tent and sort of celebrated our makeup. I'm sure y'all know what that means.
Sure.
Sure. It ended up a pretty good night, and I think we were just about falling to sleep, and all of a sudden something brushed up against the tent. And we're like, oh, crud. And I wasn't an experienced hiker and things like I am now. We did quite a bit of hiking after that in the high country. But back then, just for my own pride, I'm going to say I was pretty much a pretty green still. Knew how to camp, but didn't have the sense to know that the people had left before us because the bears had come through that camp the night before.
Makes sense.
And got into everything. And my tent happened to be right along a trail that the bears used. It was pretty dang close. So bear brushes up against the tent. And my wife is, you know, like petrified. Oh, yeah, there's something. We can hear it sniffing around outside the tent. So we are very awake at this time.
Okay.
And it must have realized that it brushed up against our tent. And previously, we'd put all the food up in the cab of the truck, and the only thing we had still down on the picnic table, which
now this particular campground, there's no lights. I mean, it's pitch black outside, right?
Oh yeah. There's a water spigot on most of them up on the top of the road or nearby. But this one, yeah, you hike down, and this one even in particular, because it sort of sits down in a bowl down off of the road that you drive to the campsite on. It was pretty dark, and there's a lot of tree cover. You know, the water's running a fast-moving stream, so it really is a pretty cool spot. And so we finished up the night. I forgot to say after dinner we roasted marshmallows, pretty typical thing. And I felt a little too lazy to go back up to the truck. And we had one of those big clear top work containers, and I stuffed a bag of marshmallows. That was all that was left. Down in the bottom of it, had all the pots and pans in it. Snapped the lid, put stuff on top of it. Figured, that'll keep raccoons out or anything else.
Booby
Wasn't
trap.
thinking about dinner. Yeah, so I kind of set myself up for failure on that one.
Okay.
Well, anyway, the only weapon I have is a pellet gun that we play around with to shoot cans or something. So
you've since
that was in the
upgraded.
tent, thankfully.
You've since upgraded, right?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Considerably. Yeah. It was, lots happened since then, but the bear, it turned out there was a mama bear and a baby bear, so that's a dangerous situation. I've since learned more about that, but they were having a good time because they found the Tupperware thing. That's what we heard, this big crash. The thing was quiet after the initial brush against the tent, and then they knocked the Tupperware thing off, and all the pots and pans spilled out, and it made quite a bit of racket. And the next morning we figured it out. They found the marshmallows, made just a little small hole in the bag, and ate every one of them. It's pretty amazing the way they did it.
Smart.
But then we found out later on that day, to talk to people, that's why the people had left.
Okay.
Experienced something similar to that. So these are camp bears that come through. They're not the type you want to be around because they're not afraid of humans. So.
Now they're in that campground. Were there a lot of other people there?
Yeah, it was pretty full. Like I said, it was a good time of year where all the choice spots by the water are full. There's a few trailer spots where you pull a small travel trailer in, and then there's a few out in the sticks. So I'd say they're probably, I'm going to say 80 to 90% full.
Okay.
The spots that were there weren't very desirable. But in between all this ruckus, when the bears are doing their thing, I get the idea to look out the tent and see exactly what it was. We didn't know for sure it was a bear at the time. So flashlight, I see one set of eyes, and it's big, and then I see another set of eyes, a little cub. And they sat there for quite a while, and I thought, well, my wife's going to lose her stuff here pretty soon. She's not going to run out of the tent. I know that. But I did have a dumb idea of putting my pellet gun into the sand and kind of making light buckshot and just kind of shot it over their way, which I don't recommend doing now, but didn't know better at the time. But, funny enough, it kind of got them on their way and they left. I'm sure they were probably done with the marshmallows at that time anyway.
Yeah.
But so you can imagine you're very awake at this point. There's adrenaline galore, and there's a couple of city slickers up there dealing with that. And my wife is nervous on a normal day, let alone after that.
Right.
So the bears go off on their way, and we lay down, and our hearts are still kind of thumping and racing. And there was no way in hell I'm going to go to sleep right now, nor her, for quite some time. We're going to be thinking about those bears coming back, and your imagination is going, and adrenaline again is still just pumping.
Sure.
And so we're just laying there, and we're kind of, I don't remember much conversation about it, but I kind of remember hearing, we were both laying there, and I heard kind of a noise. It seemed like it was coming like an electrical whirring type of, some weird kind of I don't know, a cross between an electrical hum and some other strange motorish kind of noise.
Okay.
And for just a brief second, I had a sense of direction, like it was coming from somewhere high above and say to the left. So there was a sense of direction, but only for a moment. And then the thing I remember being the strangest is all of a sudden the noise was coming from all directions. You couldn't tell. There was no sense of where it was coming from. It just surrounded us and the tent. And I remember us both kind of saying something to each other, and that's the last thing either of us remembered that night.
Now, you must have been terrified.
You know what? I didn't know it was so, I wouldn't say terrified. It just, it was like when something catches your attention and you're just about to go to the person next to you, what the hell is it? And then I remember about that, within a couple seconds of hearing it go from a direction I could kind of pinpoint it. It just felt like it was coming at us from every angle of the tent. You really could not tell any sense of direction for it. It was just around you. I'd say an equal decibel level. But like I said, that's the last thing either of us remember.
And the closest sound that you can kind of imagine that being was something electrical, you said?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what I work with, a lot of electronics and motors and things like that. I'm around a lot of stuff like that. And the only thing I'd say is it was almost the hum of the electrical motor, but there was something else totally kind of different to the sound. I mean, I could say that would probably be like a baseline sound and with it. I don't remember any pitches, any highs or lows. It was just a weird enveloping noise completely around us. And yeah, motors and sound kind of, I guess. It's nothing I can say. It's hard to describe.
Okay.
Just that it was there. Yeah, but
so at the time this happens, just to recap, so everybody following along, at the time this happens, you guys are in bed, you're waking up, you're awoken by this bear. So you've just had that incident to deal with. You're back laying down, you're wide awake. Now you're not going to sleep
Absolutely.
anytime soon. And all of a sudden you both hear this noise. And it gets louder and louder. It feels like it envelops the entire tent. And then I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, a quick sense of direction, like high up in the sky left, and then only for like a second, and then it's all around. And I don't remember any light or anything like that. It was just the sound.
Okay.
And that's literally the last thing either of the two of us remembered. And we got up the next morning.
Okay.
We started. Neither of us really thought about the bear or anything. I think it really wasn't something we remembered initially. But when I walked over to the where the Tupperware thing was still spilt all over the ground, we saw everything. We're like, "Oh shit!" Excuse me. I hope that's okay to say. But
That's
yeah,
fine.
it's like what just happened? The bear. Oh yeah, we started talking about the bear.
So you
like,
guys kind of forgot about the bear. You forgot about everything after you had gone to bed and woke up the next morning.
Yeah. But I mean, it was weird when as soon as I saw the Tupperware thing and all the dishes, it's like, oh yeah. It's like, and how
trigger
you would not remember that? How I would go to sleep within a few minutes after they bailed out of camp. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Not at all. And so we talked about the bear and stuff for a little bit, and then we had completely forgot about the sound. And I said, "You remember that sound or something to that effect?" And she was all, "Oh yeah, I totally had forgotten about that." So that the bear incident seemed to trigger that memory. And then we're like, "What the heck was that?" And we talked about it for a little bit. And that was weird. And we just remembered just being asleep. But we talked about it a little bit and just kind of got weirded out by it and left it there and just thought we'd get on with our day. And we didn't really talk about it a lot after that. But it just thought it was kind of weird that we, just kind of made up, so to speak. And then that thing comes in and, had whatever happened might have had a purpose at that time or not. I don't know. I don't want to speculate, and I didn't want to talk about it really after that. But the strangest thing was just remembering it. And, I don't know if anything like that's ever happened before, but if it has, I sure as hell didn't remember it. And there's no way at all either of us would have went to sleep that quickly.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Had kind of just not remembered it. It's just not normal, not even close to normal. I mean, yeah, bad Chinese food one night. You're up for a while and you remember that. This was nothing anybody in their right mind would have even put out of mind. Yeah, you would have been up till 2 a.m. usually thinking about that. But anyway.
So did you talk to any of the other campers about this, or was it
not?
Was it like
no?
Okay.
Not about that incident. Just the bear. And I think one of the other campers walking around asked about their, did you guys get bear last night? Yeah, typical campsite talk. We sure did, and we won't be staying back here again tonight. I think we went home the following day anyway. But I wasn't something I was going to share with people. Just it's still just it was kind of just a weird, not even I wouldn't say a memory. It's just I knew it had happened, but it was just something I couldn't. There was no interest in talking about it. I don't know, it's hard to explain. I just didn't feel the desire to say, "Hey, did you guys hear any weird noises last night?" Or
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's obviously had a huge impact on you. Just the fact that it was years before you even told me about it, and we had been camping together. We'd been close friends, and we still are. So I know how impactful it was in your life. But you've had 25 years to reflect on this, and what do you think? I mean, what do you think it was? I know we've discussed it many times, but for people that are listening to this podcast for the first time, what do you think? And just give us your thoughts.
What people have asked me, do you want to, mostly our close group of friends, they have said, and they've heard about it, is it something, one, it's nice to be believed. I would say it's not something, it's not traumatic. You don't remember, I know I feel like something happened definitely that night. I don't know if it was to both of us or whatever, but there's no reason that should have happened. There was some purpose, I think, behind it. I don't really want to know what it was, and something in me doesn't. I don't want to have regression or go through any hypnosis and relive it or nothing. I don't, for some reason, have any desire to do that. I have a little bit of interest, but there's just something that's kind of telling me I don't want to. I'm not now, and I don't know if ever.
So,
But,
would you be comfortable in saying that you think it may have been a UFO, an extraterrestrial of some sort?
You know what? It doesn't have any other logical explanation. There's nothing I can think of that would have forced us into an instant sleep and something we don't know or have any grasp on what it is. I can just tell you there's no way in hell I would have went to sleep on it like that, and there's no reason I wouldn't have remembered it. And another interesting thing is I told my wife and I had talked about it for probably 3 to 5 years, somewhere off and on. They would come into discussion, the bear and the weird noise. And after I think 5 years or so, she doesn't remember that now. And she absolutely did. We discussed it with each other. And,
wow.
And I think I don't think if that trigger hadn't happened in the morning, waking up,
Yep.
with the bear and that bear incident hadn't happened, there's no way I would have remembered what happened if something did in fact happen. But
you could have thought it was a dream or something.
Yeah, and who's to say if it's happened before? You meet other people, but anything like you said that can do that in a matter of a second or so, I mean, if we have that technology ourselves, I'd be really surprised. And
were you before this happened? Were you a UFO believer? Did you have an interest in things like that?
Probably like everybody else. It was interesting. It sounded like good folklore, and you try to pick the little bits of truth out of the story, and have a little fun with your imagination. But I didn't put a lot of weight on it. I've since found out my grandfather that passed was a rocket fuel engineer for aerospace during the 50s and stuff, and we made a lot of advances. And don't know how much truth there is to it, but he's rumored to have been out to the Roswell crash site and done research and stuff with that. He died prematurely, turned orange, hair turned white, and he died in 2 weeks' time, is the story from my folks. And that sounds like radiation exposure, right, or exposure to something. So, and there's similar stories like that throughout my family, extended family. My mom has some interesting stories, and I remember things, as a kid, sleeping late at night and hearing kind of different those kind of electronic hums that would almost put you to sleep. So a lot of that came back, I think, after that event.
Oh, so that's interesting. Really I'm sure that's something that we've talked about that maybe I forgot. But so what you're saying is what?
I didn't say much.
Yeah, what you heard that night. Yeah, what you heard that
night
at the campground, that kind of is reminiscent of what you had heard and kind of forgotten about as a child.
Yeah, and to me that's like throwing more gas on the crazy fire if I'm telling this story, and I just know how I feel when people tell me this stuff, and again I just I think either it's complete BS or you're embellishing, or you've got an active imagination, or you're just flat out missing just a couple of screws. But no, I mean it's story hasn't changed all these years. Maybe I'll go through a regression sometime or to see if we can go back to it. But even on that kind of pessimistic with science, I think there's probably some suggestiveness to that might happen. And I don't know. I don't know that it could be. I don't know that I could trust whatever happens even under those conditions.
Right.
But I do know what happened that night, and there's no changing anything about it. It hasn't changed in all these years. And,
well, I've had years to reflect on your story because that, I believe that we're not alone in this universe. I think it's kind of absurd for anybody to believe that we're it and there's nothing else out there. But, coming from maybe a skeptical point of view, I would listen to a story like yours, of course, if I didn't know you. And a lot of people would say, well, maybe he was just dreaming. Um, and I think based on the circumstances, the fact that your wife was awake and remembered it kind of puts that to rest. That's something that didn't happen. Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of people kind of write these UFO incidents off as sleep paralysis. So I don't know if you've experienced that. I've had sleep paralysis all of my life. It doesn't happen often, but ever since I was a child, I'll have sleep paralysis, and I've never had any sort of strange encounters or stories. But I think we
Yeah,
can
I
rule
can't
that
say
out.
that about me. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've been. I think that was just a unique set of circumstances on one night, and I kind of get the feeling that there's a good chance it's happened before. Not only to me, I think maybe to other members of my family, and I don't know if it has anything to do if there's any correlation between the work that my grandfather did back in the 50s and early 60s. I think he died in around 67 or so. But I've never had abnormal sleep patterns. Never slept walked. Don't have any. I don't no issues with sleeping. If anything, I anger my wife because I can just lay down my head on the pillow and fall asleep within a matter of a few minutes. And she'll stay awake at night. So the two of us going out like we did and not remember. I just think if that bear, I know if that bear situation hadn't happened and whatever happened decided to come visit us, snatch us up, whatever the hell he did, I don't know. But I don't think we would have remembered it. I'm almost certain of it.
And there's a lot of
so
UFO cases that we've heard about, whether it be through podcast, TV interviews, where this whole concept of missing time is present, where people actually miss a block of time in their lives and can't figure out what that was all about until they start remembering bits and pieces of something, kind of like what you're explaining to us.
I haven't even experienced loss of time under tequila, and that'll definitely do it for you. So, I'm a pretty.
Now, Craig, I got a question for you. Yeah. Do you still do a lot of camping?
Not as much as I used to, but after that, I started doing more serious hiking, high altitude hiking, and up above 10,000 feet stuff. So yeah, we still go a couple times a year. I wouldn't use that experience as a reason to not go, but I won't ever stay in that spot again.
That was leading my next question. I was going to ask you: have you either been back to that area, or have you experienced anything else while camping?
Nothing quite to that extent. I think one of our close friends, he's another professional and good guy that we all know. I'm not going to say his name, but we went hiking a few years after that, and it was supposed to be four of us, and it ended up just being him and I. We really didn't know each other that well, but we talked about stuff like that. We talked about my grandfather and some other just family stories, and kind of got to know each other. And I told him a lot of times when I was up since, I'd be up around the campfire and you'd look up at the stars, and every so often, if you look long enough, you'll see something weird up there, especially up in those eastern Sierras. The skies are clear, a zillion stars, but
and I can attest to that.
Enough, you will see stuff that just doesn't make sense, and you try to figure it out in your mind. You try to say, oh, that's a satellite, or it's a high altitude plane, or something the military's messing around with.
Right.
And I have other family in other sensitive government areas that involve research and stuff. I don't know a lot about what they're doing, and I never will. But I've been told there's definitely the technology that we see day to day is decades old,
right?
Pretty much obsolete if it's in front of us. So I think I'm smart enough to know, hey, there's stuff up there.
Well, I think this particular incident was a turning point in your life, and if I may, and I don't mean to get too personal, but I always text you or call you and tell you about an interview that I heard, whether it be with folks like Travis Walton or Whitley Strieber, famous UFO incidents, and say, hey, I want you to check it out. But I remember talking to you on more than one occasion about Whitley Strieber and his book Communion, and you told me, on a personal note, that you had started reading that book and just couldn't get through it because it was too I don't know. It's just too emotional, right?
Yeah, it's just it's an area I don't know I really can pinpoint. I mean, I'm a fairly emotional guy. I've got a couple daughters. I've raised around sisters. But I'm also a guy that, I could cut my finger off and throw a Band-Aid on it and drive myself to the hospital and do whatever I have to do. I'm in the contracting field and do motorcycle racing. I've done skydiving. I like my adrenaline, surfing, and all those different things.
Right.
But there's not a lot that scares me, and I won't say I'm scared. It's almost something that that's maybe a deep defense mechanism, or it's just I even talking about like this, I didn't really want to necessarily go out and go through it again, but not because it's going to emotionally wreck me and I'm going to be curled up on the kitchen floor in a ball and having nightmares. It's not that. It's
right.
just there's some answer out there, and I just don't know that I'm wanting to deal with it or need to deal with it. Curiosity a little bit, but whatever it is even quells my curiosity, which is odd if you knew me. but yeah, I couldn't get through that book, and sometimes if something comes on that has to do with UFOs or abductions and things of that nature, I may plug into it for a little while. But there's also other times where I just kind of say, I'm not in the frame of mind for this right now. I'll throw on Sports Center or something, something else. But
fair enough.
There's interest in it, and I'd like to talk with other people that have had similar things, and if you even mention like the lights we've seen hiking up super high at night. I get a lot of people that, thankfully, they know me, and few that I'm going to even talk about it. It's like talking about a ghost story. People just don't, they're not going to. There's discounts yet, and think you're nutty. And I just I don't want to have to feel that. I don't have any need to share, really.
Well,
I think.
Listen, we do appreciate you sharing the story with us, and that's part of what this podcast is all about. You've shared a story. I'm sure there's other people that have had experiences that haven't told anyone or have just told close family and close friends. And maybe if they happen upon the podcast, they'll say, hey, I had something similar happen to me. Or, better yet, I know this is like a 1 in a million shot, but hey, I was at the campground that night. That same thing happened to me and I remembered it days later. And they have the ability to email us or call us. So, so maybe...
I'm if anybody has anything I think I'd be most curious about it. If anybody's had something similar to this, taken it a step further and gone through any type of hypnosis or anything to kind of pull those memories out, something stopping me from doing it. And if I heard it from somebody else that it was a good thing, bad thing, or whatever, I'd just be curious to hear somebody else's take on it. And I certainly understand if somebody doesn't want to share that stuff.
Right.
But as I get older and the more memories go by in other areas of my life, I think maybe there'll be a time where I want to do that. But as now, I'm just kind of, because I'm doing fine how I am, why throw a wrench in the works? It's like, don't.
Right.
But curiosity is still there. So,
all right.
It's nice talking with you guys about it.
Well, thank you. Like I said before, we appreciate you coming on. We've taken up more than a fair share of your time. I know you're home with the family now, but we do appreciate it. You're our first guest, and we thank you.
Oh goodness! Well, I hope that there's nowhere but up from here then. So,
thank you, my friend.
To do so, and anything I can do to help you guys is always, reach out. Happy to do so.
Well, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig.
All right.
You have a good one.
Take care.
You guys take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Bye.
Wow, what a story Craig had.
It sure was. So, Big T, let me ask you, what do you think?
I really think he saw a UFO.
You think so, huh?
I think so.
Look, I've been processing that for the last 20 years now, and you know him probably not as well as I know him, but you know him well enough to know that he's of sound mind. He's not crazy.
Definitely.
He's a family guy, a business guy, a close friend, and I know he's not making this up. We've talked, very intimately about this experience, and it is it's something that haunts him even to this day.
Yeah, I agree. Well, for all our listeners out there, if anybody's ever experienced something to this nature, like Craig's story, give us a call, send us an email. We'd love to have you on. Love to hear your story. Again, our phone number is 909-993-3633, or you can email us at info@themidnighttruckstop.com. Well, with that being said, we're going to wrap up our first podcast.
That's right. We want to thank all of our listeners for staying with us here tonight. And until next time, keep the rubber side down
And the bugs off the glass.